Hello, my little chickadees. Yes, it's me here again. Um, this is sort of about Nearly Famous, but it's going to be more about the execution and the how you record, um, how a song gets recorded in a recording studio, and the some of the aspects, and some of the technical aspects as well of recording a track. I'm doing this especially for Mark because I know Mark wanted me to explain this further. Um, he asked me some really clever questions about excuse me about recording, and there's there's no sort of set pattern about recording because I've read about some groups that have gone in with some ideas into the recording studio and they still haven't quite worked the whole pathway from the start to the end. But normally, this is traditionally back in the past when I was involved in recording. Before we went to digital and we were still analog, analog was basically the only way you could put down your material, and you had to put it down on a really big fat tape, like a 2-inch tape, 50 millimeter tape, reel to reel. Um, and that could only hold so many tracks on it. As you can imagine, each bit of information of analog takes up a small percentage of that 50 millimeters. And so you can only fit so much on. Um, so the the cost of these studios was enormous back then. So if you went to somebody that had got a 12 track studio, that was usually a pretty good studio because 12 tracks would have cost them a lot to set it up with all the different stuff that they need for editing and putting on effects and all the rest of the stuff. And then it soon became that 12 tracks was never enough. So 24 track became the industry sort of standard, probably from the early mid 60s onwards, say, that if somebody got a 24 track, they're in business, they can do lots of tracks and fit them on this tape, and gives you a lot of ability. And so back in those days, we had to go in and generally it would also cost a lot of money to go in a studio. That's why studio time is very expensive and why record companies would only give an artist so much time to go in and say, look, we're giving you 1 week, but in that 1 week we want you to record your 10 songs or 5 songs aside if it was an album. So, 5 or 6 songs aside if you're very lucky. And so the record company would advance the group or the artist a certain amount of money for them to go and do this. And then that, when the album sales took off, if they ever did, then the record company recoups some of that money. And obviously, then the band takes a percentage of the royalties. But that's another section altogether, royalties. But let's talk about recording. So Mark was saying, how'd you come about? Well, if it's going to cost you such a lot of money to go in the studio, the best thing you can do before you get to the studio is to rehearse like mad, like Billio, every single bit of your song down to the last detail before you actually get into that expensive studio, because the rates are, and time just disappears in those places. You can be doing a drum check one day and you check it the next day and it's not quite right. Then so an engineer has to go in and you know, so you can use up a lot of money in the studio very quickly. So the best thing to do is rehearse like mad, get every song, and even have two throwaway songs that could end up being put on an album. And you've always got, like I say, 2 songs spare or maybe 3 songs spare. But 10 is an ideal if you were going for five songs per side. So you go in, you're already rehearsed. Um, you then put down what's called a backing track. So that could mean anything from just your drummer and your bass player just putting down like a ghost track so that there's something going down and we've got something to build on. So the the drums and the bass could go down, or even so to keep it all in time, maybe the singer goes in, doesn't sing it at full pitch, but sings a song to give an idea where you are in the song, and you might even go in and play it all as a band, um, and therefore it might be because famously, not Led Zeppelin, but famously um, Van Halen sometimes went in, and some of those sessions were so tight when they played them that that would be the one that would be on the album, you know. So it could be you catch a bit of magic in that very first recording. You don't throw it away. So that gets recorded as a backing track. So it could be the whole band or part of the band does a backing track. Then you go back into the studio section with the engineer and the rest of the group, and now you're sitting on these very nice plush chairs with um, some very nice speakers in front of you, but then also on top of the mixing desk, the mixing console with all the little knobs on, which are all individual tracks, you know. So you'd have 24 individual tracks there in front of you. Yeah. Even on top of that mixing desk, there might be some very small speakers that would be very cheap speakers. Because what the engineer is looking for when he's listening to this stuff is that it's fine, you can put it through big speakers and it'll sound wonderful. But in reality, in somebody's car or in somebody's little radio in the kitchen, one of these little poxy little Japanese or Chinese radios, that's where most people probably would hear your, because they would be hearing it on the radio. And so, you know, not everybody's going to have the biggest hi-fi going to listen to it perfectly. Most people are going to listen to it on quite small speakers in it's quite intimate spaces probably. So the engineer's now got the option of switching to the big speakers and we can listen to it back, and then the cheap speakers to see how it sounds through those. And by that process, you start to get some sort of standardization through your recording process. And so, yeah, we go in. And so probably the vocalist, he might have put a vocal track down, but it wouldn't be his best, and maybe his throat hasn't warmed up yet, or he was a smoker. Like, you know, we had a couple of smoking guys, and it's a bit rough in the morning. Well, they need to, you know, the throat's a very special thing, so it needs to be eased and teased into before you can scream along with a rock band. So yeah, the vocals would probably be done um, last, really, and because if anything, you know, once you've got a good guitar sound or a good drum sound and a good bass sound, uh, the singing then becomes the cherry on the cake, and the singer obviously doesn't want to hear any coughs or bad pronunciation or whatever. It's got to be heartfelt and his best performance he can ever do, which is difficult in the studio because it puts you under pressure. But I suppose once you've, you know, had a couple of beers, because I suppose we could drink in the studio, but not much. Just they could drink a couple of pints or something just to ease themselves up. Um, but yeah, so the singer would go in and do it, and then if there was any backing vocals to be put on, which in rock bands there are backing vocals. I mean, I did, and with Exposer, I did with the Rock Japan, I was doing vocals on that, and on the other songs as well. So on the chorus, you might need extra voices, and so they'd be put on after the main vocals gone on, and um, you'd all come back into the main studio console room where the mixing desk is, and if everybody's happy with the parts, the very now that all sounds difficult, but now it gets even a little bit more um, pedantic, because now you've got to get all these sound levels. You've got to mix them all together. Now, the engineer or the guy that's on the desk, the engineer, he's not only got to know all the different settings of each particular track, so the drummer might have, one, two, he could have eight microphones, against his kit at different parts of his drums and near an overhead for two cymbals and so on. Could be eight, sometimes 10. Could be 10 microphones. That's a lot of noise and information coming from just the kit. So the kits can make or break a group if it's not done right. So the drums, and remember, this was a little bit before when we were doing it in the start of the 80s to the mid 80s. The electronic drum was definitely, or electronic music was only just sort of taking hold with bands like Duran Duran and those synth bands. So there was proper beats in it, but it wasn't like a rock drummer beating. We wanted the live feel of our actual drummer playing on the track. It didn't mean that you couldn't trigger those sounds with his kick drum. So if he was doing the bass drum scheme, it means it could send a signal to it, like a click track, and then that would produce an electronic sound. So there was nothing wrong with that, but we'd shy away from that because we'd be sort of wanting it to sound a little bit sort of live, if anything. Because rock bands are great when they're live because that's where the big noise is when you're playing live. And if you strip it all down, it becomes what's the word? Sanitized in a studio. That's when it loses it. I suppose a good example of that would be, say, Thin Lizzy, for example. On their early albums, I mean, obviously this is again about how much money they had to record the early albums. If you listen to those early albums, it is rock. It is a rock music based group, but it's not got that sort of edgy loudness to it in the recording. Maybe they didn't have time, or maybe they didn't have the right engineer, or couldn't afford the right engineer at the time. But then when they did they get to say Johnny the Fox album, they get a good producer in there and an engineer, and that still stands up well today. I mean, that was recorded in say 1977, 78, and the guitars on that sound well. The whole album, everything sounds well on those albums. Being in a recording studio is, a big moment for any group. Um, so when that's all been done and the mixing's been finalised, which I'll tell you now, it's a very difficult thing because even even when you've played your best or you've got your best solo down and the singer thinks he sang the best, there's somebody in the room that goes, "Is that a mistake, or did I just hear something there? And did you not play that there?" And then we start to pick at each other. I think you know where this is going. That leads to like frustrations and the dynamics of the group. And this is where you just hope that your friends in the group can, accept certain things. It's never going to be absolutely perfect, and nothing ever really is, it? It's near perfection, but it's unobtainable. A bit like, say, absolute zero in space. 273 minus 273 Kelvin. You can get very close to absolute zero in a laboratory in the world somewhere in America, but you can never get right the way down to it. And it's the same with music and perfection. You can get as close as you can possibly get within the limits of human um, skills, shall we say? Yeah. So recordings are very fickle, and sometimes it can be very quick. I think I mentioned when we did the Exposer one, it was 4 tracks, and we only had 1, 2, 3, 6. We'd only got something like 6 hours, 6 hours to get it down, to get the 4 tracks down, and then the next afternoon, a Saturday afternoon, which is another 6 hours, so in 12 hours to get it mixed. So it was a really fast process. Again, it all comes down to how much you pay. When I did the one with the Le Griff and we did Breaking Strain album or extended player, whatever you want to call that, we had more time. We had nearly, I think we had three evenings, and the engineer was very easy to work with him. An hour here, an hour there. He was not that bothered. He just wanted us to have a finished product that we were all happy with, and so that sessions was quite good with Le Griff. Yeah, so recording. So in that mixing thing, I'll quickly tell you there'd be these different, all these different knobs going up one track, and all those different knobs do certain functions. Between tone and variation of tone and bass, and there'd be places where you could add effects and take effects out on that, just on that one, just on that one track. When the engineer's mixing this down, he's got a Stabilo pen, red pencil type of thing, and he's got the whole of the mixing desk along here would be a white piece of paper that is just a piece of white paper or that's been stuck on the edge of the mixing, and he's written down there. So if Tim's in one, Steve's in two, drummer's in three, Mark's in four, so on, and all the way down here. Kick drum in five, cymbals here, hi-hat here, snare drum here, first lead solo here, second lead solo here, and this list would be along the front of the desk like that. So now he's mixing it and he's listening to it as he's recording it onto the big fat tape now. So we're not just listening to it back, we're listening to it back as it's being recorded to that thick tape. So those two reels are going around like that, and the tape's going round, and he's got to look at his little list and go, oh yeah, so Tim's solos up to volume 8 when he does his solo. So it's coming along and the track's going, listen to it, this is the solo, and he reaches up to that knob there, and now he boosts my guitar while it's recording that for the duration of the solo, and then as soon as the solo's finished, brings that slider or pot, usually as a slider actually, he brings the slider down to where it was before, so he's just upped the guitar in the places that you need it, and it's the same with effects and everything else. So it's quite a complicated thing while that's all running in real time. Quickly, I will just say that the big jump has been digital, and so now you can go in studios and it's super cheap now, and you can do such a lot at home with very, very minimal gear now. So with a computer and a decent sound card in your computer, you could make sounds as good as Pink Floyd were doing in 1971. You could do that in your bedroom. So this is how far the technology's gone. And as you know, I suppose, as Mark knows about AI, I haven't been used to AI, but he has, and and now you've got this incredible ability to just have professional sounds at your fingertips, which we never had. It all had to be done manually and out of your imagination, and then the technology would enhance that. But that's how it was done. We are coming up to 20 minutes here, so yeah, it's a long one. So yeah, hope that helped you, Mark, and anyone else who's interested in recording. Let me know if I haven't covered anything, but I think I have. So yeah, free Lucy, free Palestine. See you soon.